Today, I wanted to simply talk to you about something that I talk about every day, all day long with my patients, and that is what is the pelvic floor? Because a lot of people really have no idea that they have a pelvic floor and what it is for. So today is a little bit more of an anatomy lesson and some education as to why you should care about your pelvic floor. So visuals are always helpful for me. So today I have my little pelvis with us today. And so our pelvic floor is the bowl of muscles on the bottom of the pelvis here. And they surround our urethra, vagina, and anus. So they go from the pubic bone in the front to, if I turn it around, the tailbone in the back here. And they go around all of the openings. So as you can probably tell, this is a model of a female pelvis, but males do have pelvic floor muscles as well. And they pretty much span the same area from the pubic bone in the front to the tailbone in the back and across to the two sit bones. So these are called our ischial tuberosities, and the pelvic floor kind of spans side to side from there. There are several layers of pelvic floor muscles that help to support our pelvic organs. So they make a bowl on the bottom of our pelvis, and hence why it's called or nicknamed the pelvic floor muscles, because if they're not there, take it out, we have a giant hole, hello, in the bottom of our pelvis, and that would not be a good thing. So this bowl of muscle here is what we're going to talk about. And actually there's lots of little muscles that comprise the pelvic floor or comprise the pelvic floor, and we're going to talk about them collectively as a whole. Okay. So what does the pelvic floor muscles, what do they do for us? And that's, so they have actually several features and functions. So just like muscles anywhere else in our body. So let's take some of the muscles in my hand on that. The pelvic floor muscles need to contract and tighten. So with our pelvic floor, a lot of times people have heard of what's called a Kegel exercise, and that is a contraction or a tightening of the pelvic floor. It should feel like a closing off around the holes, so puckering around the anus or vagina, a lifting up and in. And so that motion is what people commonly think of when they think of using the pelvic floor. But it's not functional for a muscle simply just to contract all the time. That'd be like me walking around saying, you know what, I want my hand to work really well, so I'm just going to tighten it all the time and kind of walk around like this. That's not very functional. So muscles also need to relax and let go. So pelvic floors need to contract, and they also need to relax and let go, especially when we're going to urinate or have a bowel movement. And on the bowel movement side of it, not only do the muscles need to relax, they need to stretch out and open up to allow for that bowel movement to come out. So we need to be able to have the muscles stretch. So they need to contract, they need to relax, and they need to stretch, okay? The pelvic floor muscles also need to coordinate together with other muscles in and around the pelvic area. So no muscle in our body works in isolation. And the pelvic floor muscles especially are part of our deep core support system. So what does that mean? It means that our pelvic floor as part of the core is kind of the bottom of the core. And the front wall of it are our abdominal muscles, okay? And the back wall of our deep back muscles. And the top part of our core is our diaphragm. And so all of those coordinate together to help regulate pressure in the abdominal cavity. And so if one part of that system isn't working well, say the abdominal muscles are too weak, maybe we just had a baby not too long ago and the abdominal muscles are really weak and stretched out, other parts of the system are going to take on that load and react to that. So we want to make sure that all of those are coordinating together well. And one way to make sure that that's doing it well is to have proper breathing mechanics to move our deep core support system. So as we inhale, our diaphragm ends up coming down. Our belly should come out a little bit to accept the pressure, and our pelvic floor should go down a little bit to accept the pressure. And then as we exhale, our pelvic floor comes back up, our belly comes in, and our diaphragm comes back up. And that should all coordinate and work together that way. Now that sounds simple when I'm saying it, but repeat that a few times and take a look at how you're breathing, because a lot of times I see women when they take a deep breath is they kind of inhale and pull everything up, and they end up sucking their belly in on the inhale, and that actually creates more pressure. So really your abdomen should relax a little bit on a deep inhale to accept the breath. So that's talking a little bit more about how the pelvic floor muscles coordinate together with the other deep core muscles. The other thing that the pelvic floor muscles are important for is think of them like a bowl on the bottom of your pelvis, and they support our pelvic organs, which are the fruit. So our pelvic organs would be our bladder in the front, our vagina and uterus right behind it, and our rectum and anus right behind that. And so the pelvic floor creates this supportive bowl underneath that to help keep the organs where they need to be. And if we have a support issue, we might end up dealing with something called a pelvic organ prolapse, which is something where we lose some of the support and some of our pelvic organs start to sag down. And this is more common than a lot of people think, and happens more frequently in women than we know or talk about. And that's one of the things I frequently work with patients here. So we've talked about the pelvic floor muscles needing to be able to contract, relax, stretch, coordinate with other muscles, provide support for our pelvic organs. They also provide support for the bony pelvis itself. So the pelvis is a ring, and the pelvic floor muscles attach all the way around the bottom of it. So they help to stabilize and support this bony ring and provide some rigidity to the structure there. Okay, so they give support that way. Pelvic floor muscles are involved in normal bowel and bladder function. So like we talked about earlier, they contract and make sure that the urethra contribute to that aspect as well. So if we have weak or too tight pelvic floor muscles, we may be missing out or having some issues as far as it relates to intercourse, maybe pain with intercourse, or maybe not able to get arousal or orgasm, and that can, definitely affect our sexual health and happiness that way. So in total, you've learned that the pelvic floor is involved with lots of different aspects. So just as a quick review, our pelvic floor muscles need to contract, relax, stretch, coordinate with other muscles. They're involved as the support system for our pelvic organs. They help to create support for our bony pelvis. They are involved in normal bowel and bladder function, and they're involved in normal sexual health. So if you are having any issues in any of these areas, there might be a pelvic floor component to it. And this is a great time to potentially partner up with a pelvic physical therapist to get evaluated and see what's going on.